Hey everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm happy to have you here today to make some minestrone soup with me. I am going to be making a soup with freeze-dried ingredients, frozen ingredients out of my root cellar and my cold room and my canning room. So I thought it would be kind of a fun recipe to show you how to use these kinds of ingredients to make a really delicious soup. You will notice that there is some coughing going on probably during this video, maybe a little bit from myself, although I didn't get the cold that my family has as bad as some of my family members did, but we have a lot of coughers in the house right now. So I wanted to make a really nutritious soup like this to give everybody some really good nutrients to help their bodies heal from this bad cold. So let me show you what we have here. So here are the main ingredients that I'm going to be working with for this minestrone soup. We have some parsley, some basil. I have to go grab some oregano from the pantry still, some salt, bunch of canned tomatoes, chickpeas. This is some of the French onion soup that I made, so I decided I'd throw a jar of that in there. Some more canned tomatoes. This is some kidney beans over here. Some broth. I'm not sure if I'm going to need to use that or not. We'll see how it goes. Some freeze-dried celery, frozen kale, frozen zucchini, and some carrots over here that have already been peeled that I just need to chop up. I'm going to make a gigantic batch of soup. You can see over here. This soup freezes really well, but you could also pressure can it. All of the ingredients that go into this soup can be pressure canned. So I may end up doing that. We'll see how it goes. I'm also going to be making some bread. I have shown you guys how I make bread many times before, so I won't walk you through each step of the process, but I'll probably show you some of it as we go. So let's get all of this stuff prepped up. I want to get my onions and my garlic into the pan with a whole bunch of probably olive oil. I'm trying to get into using lard a little bit more for frying rather than olive oil because I have so much lard that I put up for the winter months. And because I have heard through the grapevine, and I don't know if this is true or not, but that olive oil is supposed to be going up in price. So it makes more sense to me to use something that I already have that is virtually free, that's a byproduct of raising pork, which we do. But for the sake of this soup, since it is an Italian soup, we'll use olive oil. I'm so happy with the way my onions are holding up in the cold room this year. Last year was not a great year for storing onions in the cold room, but this year they are doing fantastic. I'm not going to be putting too many onions in this. Normally I would use a couple of really large onions, but I am going to be using this French onion soup here as a base, and it has lots of onions and garlic in it already. In fact, I'm probably not even going to add the extra garlic until I've had a chance to taste it, because I don't know if you can see how much garlic is in there, but there's a lot. But a couple of fresh onions to use, I think, will add a really nice flavor to our minestrone soup. I'm gonna grab my onion chopping goggles because my eyes are starting to burn already. Okay, throw those in our pan. I'm not doing any kind of measurements. What I would suggest with making this or any other kind of soup is to use the bulk of your ingredients that you really enjoy. So if you like carrots, use a ton of carrots. If you like beans, use lots of beans, and use that as kind of your guide for how much you should use in your soup. And then when it comes to your liquid, add all of your non-liquid ingredients to your pot. And once you have all those in, just cover up those ingredients with enough liquid so there's just an inch or so above the level of it. And that way you won't end up with too much of a watery soup. And this is specifically when talking about any type of vegetable soup that isn't a cream soup. Look at how nice these carrots are. So these are carrots out of our garden that just came up from the root cellar. think I'm gonna call this good for carrots for right now, and I'll add some more later if I need to. Now for our squash. Look at the color of that, isn't that gorgeous? I think I will do both of these. Squash. Wow, that didn't really turn out the way I intended. So these are going to be going down to my chickens. We have what we call our pig scraps bucket that sits out on the deck, and that's where a lot of our scraps go. But anything that is specifically for the chickens, I just put in a bowl while I'm cooking, and then that goes down to them right away afterwards. I usually have enough to warrant a trip down there. Thank you to the person who sent this to me. I just love this little scraper so much. If you don't have a little scraper like this, you can use a canning lid. Kind of works the same way. Oh, I wanted to give you guys an update on the sprouts too. So I'll just get this chopped up and put in our pan or our pot, and then I'll show you where we're at with our sprouts. As usual, I have a pot of milk on the stove that's going to be turned into yogurt. Whenever I show making yogurt like this, a lot of people ask why I don't use my Instant Pot. So I only really use my Instant Pot for doing beans. And I find that when you cook beans in an Instant Pot, the seal around the edge absorbs a lot of that beany smell. And I have found that making yogurt in it after doing that, no matter how diligent I am with cleaning it, is that yogurt ends up having kind of a bean flavor, which is not my favorite. Not my favorite thing. So I find doing it this way doesn't take me any more time than using my Instant Pot. Actually, I think it's probably faster. So I have all these chopped up. I find it so much easier to peel squash like this when you cut it into sections like this. So now I'm going to take my strainer and I'm going to rinse off my kale and my zucchini in the sink to get all those little ice crystals that can make it taste a bit freezer burnt off. Two of my strapping young lads came and peeled these for me because my hands were just killing me by the second one. So we have these all nice and chopped now, and I'm going to chop these squash into similar sized pieces as I did the carrots. That's kind of another rule for when you're making soup, is keep everything around the same size, especially if it's a certain level of density like a squash or a carrot, and that way they'll be cooked all at the same time and you won't end up with some things really mushy and other things not cooked through. I have my carrots and my onions fried up over there, so I'm going to get these thrown in next, and then I am going to get my beans rinsed off, and those will go in next. I can hardly wait to eat this soup. It's going to be so good. And then while this soup is cooking, we'll make some bread. I just love squash, definitely a favorite veggie. I have some kids who are not fans of squash, but they do enjoy squash and soup, which is great. I have another awesome squash soup recipe that I'll be sharing with you over the next few weeks or so, and it is a ginger curry squash soup. It's so good. So again, I think like with the carrots, I'm going to hold back these pieces of squash and add those in later on if I decide I want to. And over here, I have my rinsed off what I thought was kale, but is actually collards. So we're going to throw those in there too. You can add collards to minestrone soup. You could add cabbage. Throw all that in there. Those are, or that's the zucchini. I think I should actually get another package of zucchini, and I'm just going to chop up these collards just a little bit more finely so they're not big, huge pieces. That's soup is smelling so good. So we're gonna use a quart of chickpeas and a quart of kidney beans. These are actually kidney beans that we canned up the other day together. So we're gonna add our chickpeas and our beans. So we're going to add our French onion soup. So remember in the last video I was talking about how siphoning is caused by rapid temperature change. So when you're taking things out of your can, or if you take them off or out before they've had a chance to cool down a little bit, some of the liquid can come up and come out the top. And that's what happened with this one. This soup is looking so beautiful already. I'll show you in just a sec. Look at how pretty that's looking. So I am going to throw freeze-dried celery right into it because it will absorb the liquid and rehydrate from the soup itself. So I think I'm going to add 2 cups or so. That should do it. And we have our freeze-dried parsley and freeze-dried basil. And I'm adding a couple of tablespoons of each. I cannot say enough good things about freeze-dried herbs, my friends. They are just a step above dehydrated herbs. They are so good. They just smell just like they would when I would pick them out of the garden in the summertime. They're so, so good. Adding a little bit of salt. I'll add most of my salt towards the end of the soup, the cooking down of the soup, so that I don't want to over salt it. What else are we going to put in there? We may as well throw this thing of broth in here, and then I'm going to top it off with water and we'll let it cook down. Oh, soups like this excite me because they're so beautiful to look at and they smell so amazing. And the fact that it was created with food that I grew here for the most part on my farm over the summer is just feels so good. I think what I am going to do with this soup, I'm going to let it cook and all those flavors meld, and then I'm going to add a little bit more, either some tomato paste or a jar of tomato sauce, so it has a little bit more tomato base going on with it, because I added in the French onion soup and that soup stock, it has a less tomatoey kind of clearer broth than I want for a minestrone soup. So we're going to let that cook now for a bit, and then we're going to move on to making some bread. And I kind of am thinking that I want to make some buns today instead of bread. Yeah, let's do that. Let's make some buns and go from there. I always get asked anytime I show this little can opener where I got it from, and this was also a gift from a subscriber, so I don't know where she got it from, but I do know you can get these from 4 Jars. They're making lid lifters like this now, and they and you can also find them on Amazon, but they are the best can opener for mason jars that I have found, because they don't cause a lot of damage to the lid. So even if you ever did need to reuse your lids for any sort of reason, you can see this lid here. I just used it on this lid and there's no damage on it at all. So I reuse all of my lids for dried goods and freeze-dried goods and things like that. I don't reuse them for canning, but I do save them. So if I ever did need to use them, I would have them available. So before we get into doing the buns though, I just wanted to quickly fill you in on where we're at with our sprouts here sitting over on the window. So I have some lentils, some alfalfa, excuse me, and then a larger seed mix over here. And what I'm doing, whenever I talk about doing sprouts, hang on, just need to grab a drink. Whenever I talk about doing sprouts, there's always a few comments about safety concerns with doing sprouts. And I have been making sprouts like this, excuse me, without any issues. And so I'm just going to run you through the way that I do it, the way that I was taught. I have done a little bit of research into the safety issues, and what I'm about to show you tends to mitigate those issues. So you want to use very clean, preferably sterilized containers for doing them. So that I should just back up and say that the safety concern is E. coli with doing sprouts. The best way to avoid having that as an issue is wherever you're sprouting, don't do any food preparation that is using raw meat, for instance, so that because it could inadvertently splash up and get into your sprouts. I have mine up on my windowsill over there, which seems to work great. The other thing is you want to rinse off your seeds several times a day. So rinsing them off with fresh water so they're not sitting in stagnant water. And in the bottom of your bowl, you will collect a little bit of water that will drain out of your seeds when they're tipped on their side, like so. And you want to wash your bowl out every time you change your water. So these are, you can see, I'm not sure if you can actually see that, but these are just starting to grow roots. And as well as, I'm not sure if you can see these either. So we're on day 2. Is this day 2 or day 3? It might be day 3. And you can see some root growth happening here. Once your root growth starts, it is a pretty fast process until you can have edible sprouts. And the lentils are doing the same thing. They're developing roots too. So we're going to go over and give these a rinse. The nice thing about these lids, these ones are my favorite for sprouting. These ones I got from West Coast Seeds, is you can just run the water right in through the lid really easily and give them a little bit of a rinse off like so, and then dump the water out. I like to kind of shake my seeds back up the jar like that. That's just a personal preference. And remember to rinse our bowls here. And I guess if you wanted to get really particular about it, you could always put new bowls when you change them out. But I am not going to worry about that. So this one, you can see I have a mason jar with a whole bunch of holes in it. Certainly does not work as well as the store-bought ones, but works well enough to use. I wanted to thank those of you who came over to Instagram from YouTube on whatever video it was that I mentioned that I'm going to be sharing all the food that we are eating each day over on Instagram for the Pantry Challenge. So I have started doing that. I started sharing this morning. We had muffins and yogurt with stewed rhubarb on top. It was really good. So thanks to those of you that are over there. And if you do want to come over there, I'm just under Little Mountain Ranch on Instagram, and I do try to share there pretty much every day. Okay, now let's make some buns. I really think that the squash in this soup, let me show you, just add something to it with the orange. Smells amazing. Okay, we're gonna make some quick rolls today because it is already 11:45. So these are a 30-minute recipe. We need, I'm gonna double this recipe up as per usual. Quick rolls always call for a ton of yeast, like an excessive amount of yeast. This recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of yeast. So whenever I am doubling a recipe like this, I don't double the yeast. Just don't find that it is necessary. So we've got our yeast in here. We're going to add a couple of cups of water, nice warm water, but not hot, just under 3 cups. When my oldest kids were little, I stressed, that was half a cup by the way, I used to stress about sugar. And let's be honest, sugar in large quantities, of course, isn't good for our bodies. But I have found that, like all things, moderation is better. It is less stressful, and stress is probably more harmful on our bodies than sugar is going to be. So I find it's less stressful just not to worry about it so much and just try to feed my kids healthy, good food, allow some treats in there, allow a little bit of sugar in there, and they turn out just fine. Okie dokie doodle. Need a 1/3 cup of olive oil, and I'm gonna need to run downstairs and grab another thing of olive oil. One sec. Okay, 2/3. My cold room is so cold that it has solidified my olive oil a little bit, so I'm just gonna run this under some hot water. So we're gonna go with 6 cups of flour. So this is my 1.5 cup measure. Need a teaspoon of salt. So we're gonna let this knead for 5 minutes. Oh, shoot. Darn it, I forgot the eggs. So if you ever have to add a liquid ingredient into a bread product that's already started to mix, the trick to actually having it incorporate is to add a little bit of flour in with it. Okay, I have decided to add another quart of kidney beans to this because I can tell by looking at it that it needs a little bit more. And nothing on the edge. I always like to rinse off my beans before I throw them in my soup. When you are going to take anything out that you're going to have to really kind of shove, and sometimes I find beans are like that, especially if they're dry canned, which these were. That doesn't mean that I canned them dry, it just means that I canned the beans in water when the beans hadn't soaked or been cooked or anything else. It's my least favorite way of canning beans. But when you need to pry things out of them, out of a container like this, don't use a knife when you're doing it or any kind of metal thing, because you can scratch the inside of your jar and it actually creates kind of little micro cuts in your jar that can cause your jar to be more fragile and more likely to break when you're canning. So use wood. And this one was made by one of my boys. Isn't that fantastic? Dan was checking the weather forecast this morning, and one of the nights next week is supposed to get down to negative 15 degrees Celsius, which is a little bit more normal for us. Right now it's 2 degrees above freezing and has been this way for, ages. So I'm not looking forward to that, although I have to admit it will feel a little bit more normal and a little less concerning, like this warm weather we've been having. So that is pretty sticky, so I'm gonna add a little flour to my counter. Even if I use my mixer, I like to give my bread a little bit of a hand knead. So we're gonna let this rise for, I don't know, 20 minutes. We'll say 20 minutes, and then we'll make our buns. Okay, I am going to sit down and have a cup of tea and wait for this to rise for a little bit. Our soup has now come to a boil and it's just smelling more amazing by the second. What did I do with my spoon? Aha. The only thing that I wish I had done is even chopped up the collards even more finely, but that's all right. We have our bun dough here, and I just tried the soup and it was delicious. So good. It'll be ready exactly when the buns are. There's my timer. So I'm just going to make some little tiny buns. Have you noticed more colds this year and flus this year than in previous years? I feel like we are just getting hit nonstop since probably the beginning of October with colds. It's just been crazy. And in our family, of course, it takes a while for it to cycle through everybody. So I feel like we have had somebody sick in the house for 3 straight months now at this point. But in my personal circle of people, it's been the same for everybody I know, with lots and lots of colds and flus, and bad ones too, like really bad coughs. It seems to be kind of a theme. I was going to add some more tomato to the soup, but it is really good just as it is. I don't even have to add any more salt or anything. All those veggies flavored things up, and that French onion soup that I used at the beginning. Just have my oven on bread-proof. It's nice and warm. Several of you were asking her name. This is Alex, and she is just the sweetest little baby. She was in my Q&A video over the weekend, and I think she stole the show. She's so sweet. She is half British short hair tortoise shell and half Bengal, and so it'll be interesting to see what kind of cat. My mom was telling me that Bengals tend to be a little bit more aloof. She is what I would say super confident and very brave. She has not been scared since the minute she came home, even with all of us and all the noise and all the animals and everything everywhere. But she is really, really affectionate. She just loves people. She sleeps with the kids all night and loves to be snuggled. So I don't think she got the aloofness of the Bengal. She does have a few spots on her back, so it'll be fun to see what she develops into as she... Okay, I just turned the heat off on here so this can cool down a little bit, and then it'll be ready, and it'll still cook just with the heat of the soup itself. It'll keep cooking until the buns are ready. So I'll be back with you again when it's all done. Okay, our soup is done and it's good. The buns just came out of the oven and they turned out really well. That is a nice fluffy looking bun. So it turns out my favorite part of the soup is actually the collards. I love them. They're so good. All the kids think the soup is really, really good. They wanted to dig into it before the buns were ready. That is a scrumptious bun. I think this might be the best soup that I have made so far this winter. It is really, really good. This is more inspiration rather than recipe, although I will try to develop a specific recipe with these ingredients with measurements. But you can pretty much just play with the flavors that you really like and then use tomatoes as your base, add a few beans, and you'll have a really good soup that I am sure that your family will really enjoy. Yum. So this bun recipe was inspired by Kitchen Meets Girl is the name of the website, and it's her 30-minute bun recipe. I did a few things a little bit differently, but it's a really good one. All right, friends, I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.